warm welcome. The state of the Sri Lankan economy in the face of East European crisis, as well as a fuel crisis in the country and a forex crisis. Let's talk about all this and much more with a guest I'm meeting after a very long time. A very warm welcome, Mr. Tissa Jayaweera.
Thank you.
An economist, a business leader, educationist. You're currently the executive member of the Executive Council of SARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ex-committee member of the International Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka, and I met you when you were president of the American Chamber of Commerce many years ago. You were also in the United States, and in Sri Lanka you held several positions prior to this. But I'd like to talk about a number of questions that the Sri Lankan economy is facing.
You start firing and I'll answer.
I'll start off with the IMF. Just on Wednesday, IMF said Sri Lanka should tighten monetary policy in order to contain rising inflation, to manage the high debt repayments that Sri Lanka, these commitments that Sri Lanka has to face, and to be on track and reverse one of the worst financial crises the country has faced in years. That's what the IMF has continually told Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka has made it clear that there is no IMF requirement. We're going in for a homegrown solution. But right now, what is your assessment of what Sri Lanka can do in the present circumstances? Let's leave the IMF out, but what can we do given the current situation we're facing?
Yeah, now see, if you look at IMF, they advise various countries on how to manage their finances and things like that, but we can always go in for a homegrown solution because we have the expertise, but then the expertise must be disseminated at the right time, at the right place, and at the, when it is required. Right now we have a lot of experts talking on the subject, but nobody has focused on the solution. So what we require is in this country is not talk, right? We have to walk, and now the walking has still not started. So that's where we are at, and then the walking should have been done about 8 months ago when, there are...
do you think it was the present government that did not do the walking? But is this a failure of the current government, in your opinion?
I will not blame governments, right? I blame the people who are in charge of governance. Right? Governments can come and go because it all depends on the people's requirement. And in this country, people vote governments out of power more than voting governments into power. So let's forget about governments. But then we have so many economists, we have so many educated people, we have so many people who have worked overseas. All those people can be pooled into something, and then their ideas can be taken forward for the betterment of the country, not based on politics. It should be based on economics. So that's where this country has failed. If you take, for example, now we got our independence with our closest neighbor. The closest neighbor was also down, we were economically better off than most of the countries in this region, right? What happened? In 4 years or 5 years, maybe, we got our independence in 48, right? And then by 1958, 59, we had moved from first world to second world. Why? Because of the politicization of the economy. So there were think tanks at that time. There were people who were educated overseas, who were experts. We have so many people of this country working overseas, right, in supreme positions. And they run, sometimes part of the economic development of those countries are done by us. Now we like to look at Singapore. Right? Singapore was a poor country at that time when we were the first world, but then they had the political vision to develop. They were starving, just like what is happening now. There was scarcity of food in Singapore at the time that we were a first world country, but they got out of it. And if you're too young to remember all these stories, but Singapore came here to take us as an example how to develop Singapore. Now our people are going to Singapore.
Very popular. We talk about it. We take pride in this story.
We are very proud of the history. right? We talk of 2,500 years of history, but we have not grown even to the extent that we were 2,500 years ago. So we are still, that's why I say we are not walking, right? We are only talking. For the past so many years, we have been talking, whereas everybody else has overtaken us. Take, for example, another neighbor of ours. They were poor. I have worked in that country. They were poor. But now we are going to them to borrow.
Bangladesh.
I said, I will not go to the country, you go to the country. I mean, like that. Now, see, even the economy of India, right? We were better off than economy of India. I first went to India with my father in the 1950s, right? I mean, public service, of course, was underpaid at that time, so is it now. So we took Nestamol, we took Wilkinson blades, we took a lot of things to be exchanged in India for Indian currency because that was so much in demand. We had all that. Now we are importing Horlicks from India, we are importing chocolates from India, we are importing a lot of things from India. What happened to us?
What happened to us? Your generation is probably disappointed at the state of the Sri Lankan economy today from where it was decades ago. Our generation discouraged that the situation doesn't get better, and the generations that follow, they probably feel there's no hope. But there must be a way. Sri Lanka has always managed to sustain and come out of these situations. We should find a way. You mentioned that we should look at economic based policy to revive the economy and not based on politics. But do you think we see, this seems like a fine line to our governments and our policymakers don't seem to understand the difference between a consistent policy and to keep politics aside. As political power changes, policies do change too. But today, we see a fuel crisis. What can we do now in order to rectify this situation for the generations to come?
Okay, we have various stories being given in this country for the current crisis that the people are facing. It's not, I mean, you are facing, I am facing, but we are better off than, say, 76% of the population of this country. Right? There is about 10% who don't feel it, right? But then 76% of the country who are in the, say, now we are above the $1 per day line, but then they are the people who are facing. And now, today, for example, while coming, my driver said, why are these people wasting their time in a fuel line? Right? They should be given a token. Come at this time, and then everybody in this country, we have 21 million or 22 million people. There are 26 million mobile phones in this country. They can send a text message, vehicle number, come at this time, there won't be a line. See the economic waste in this country, and some of them are inside the vehicle with the windows closed and the AC is running. And when you have a vehicle static, right, your RPM is now with the AC is about 800 to 1000 RPM. When you're on the freeway, your RPM is about 1200 to 1400. See, 400 is only used while the vehicle is driving. 800 is used standing by.
So and there is fuel wastage unnecessarily.
Yeah, there is. And then people are staying 1 kilometer. They don't push the vehicle. And then, now say, some time ago in India, when they had this crisis, every traffic light, police is to ensure that the engine is switched off. Now India doesn't have now they don't have a power crisis, they don't have a fuel crisis. I'm talking, say, 30 years ago in India. So, and even the headlights of buses were banned in the country because it drained the battery in the night. Those are the myths that they had. Now we waste so much of economy of this country by people not taking the right decisions at the right time. And then, now see, all our decisions are politicized. That's wrong. Now see, India has, I have gone for meetings to India in delegations from Sri Lanka, right, for over 2 years on the same topic. I have gone with maybe 4 or 6 delegates of this country for the same meeting, whereas in India, same people, same 5 or 6 people are there. right? So we go and talk a different story there. And these people don't know what the story that were related by the people who attended that meeting, because people have changed. So that's where our fault is, politicization of the economy and the politicization of the people. Now India has permanent secretaries, permanent staffs. They don't change till they retire, right? Unless there is some issue that they have failed, then they are changed. I mean, take USA, permanent secretaries. Right? All over the developed world, there are permanent secretaries. There are no political secretaries. Today also I heard in the news 2 secretaries have been appointed. Now from where they come, I don't know. Right? There should be a professional administrative service for the country to develop.
We're not being fair by these officers who continue to be changed, swapped and reappointed, because they too take time to understand the business, understand their work. Now, the IMF too, Mr. Jayaweera, did call Sri Lanka to adopt a cost recovery energy pricing to be adopted. Given this present fuel crisis, you have suggestions here to say, let's use digitalization, let's use technology to manage the current crisis. But when you talk about a cost recovery energy pricing system, what does this mean? Can Sri Lanka look into these suggestions by the IMF in a more productive way?
Yeah, their submission is correct. We have to agree on that. But our politicization of the economy is not accepting what they say. Now, for example, I first went to USA in 1976. Fuel was 92 cents a gallon, right? Now it's about $5 a gallon, right? When I first brought my car here to the country, it was $2.50 a gallon at that time. Now it's 450 a gallon. Now we price by ourselves by liter, but we are the only country that is selling fuel below the cost. So how can a country develop? And then say, for example, everything that we do, you guys go and face the union, right? And then union leaders are uneducated. There are few who claim to be graduates in various subjects, but their thinking capacity is not there. They are just there to, now see, we are always in a panic. Right? The government is also put into a panic. People are also put into a panic. Now, say, there is surplus growth of vegetables now. But what was being said, without fertilizers, vegetables can't grow. I took a tour recently of, say, 2/3 of the country, because my family came from USA, and I did south to north.
And you drove?
Yeah, I drove. And now, I have never drawn that distance because I always take a driver, but this was family time that we wanted to have. So when a driver is there, there is no family time. So 4 of us, we drove, and then we had a lot of fun because they came here for 14 days, and 12 days of the 14 days we were on the road. So we were driving quite well, and our roads are good, and our road discipline has improved. Right? I didn't find...
in Colombo?
Outside. Traveling, I did 2,000 kilometers in 12 days.
Okay.
Right? But there were less buses coming at you.
Wow, okay.
Right? Maybe there were less buses on the road, less trucks taking risky overtaking. Maybe our policing is good because there was police all over the place. There are still military checkpoints, so those are good controls. But now, say, if you drive in USA or Europe, you get 1 or 2 crazy drivers, but they are monitored by satellite. So when they go home, there is a ticket.
Right.
Now in this country, still, I have written on this subject many times, a license is taken over by the police, and then, say, if you are driven 200 kilometers out somewhere, police returns a license. There was a time that they sent it by registered post. That doesn't happen. So we are an economy that talks. I have written also about it. We are a bottle of soda. Open the lid, gas comes, gas goes, we are back in the dump. there is no monitoring of what has been done. For example, right, motorcycles had to be driven with the headlamps on. Even the police are not riding their motorcycles with the headlamps on. Now in USA, on a freeway, mandatory that the lights of motorcycles be on. So is Europe. And now most of the new cars, the lights come on automatically.
Going back to the question of energy, I recently read an article you had published. You talk about the need for a focus on making loss-making state-owned enterprises profitable or at least break even. The IMF also calls for reforms, and this is for state-owned enterprises, but it looks like this is a failed project altogether, because we continue to talk about reviving state-owned enterprises. Or should we term this different, or should there be a different approach?
I agree with you. There should be a different approach. Now this approach was started in 1989 during President Premadasa's time, and then at the end of it, the state enterprises were picked. Right? Some were bad, some were profitable, so they were listed in the stock market. And the employees were made shareholders. 10% of the shares were given to employees. I was heavily involved in that system at that time because I came back to public service in 1989. And then I was involved in this privatization of state-owned enterprises. We did it very successfully, and they are all there. The ownership, of course, has changed, but none of them are running at a loss. They are all profitable, and they have become great companies. I was featured in The Economist as turning around dead corporations. So why are we, I mean, these are all public money. Right? We have 22 million people supporting 1.4 million state employees plus state corporations. There is about another million being employed in state corporations which are being funded by the state. Why should the state fund dead corporation? Now see, England has privatized almost all their state organizations. London Transport, excellent. There are more buses that are than that are required on the road. I
just want to make it clear here. Are you saying that privatization is the way forward for us? I
will say that is peopleization that is way forward.
What does that mean?
That means people must become shareholders of these companies, right? And now, of course, conglomerates are buying the shares of the people and they are becoming big, but people must become shareholders of the companies, and the managers of the companies, not the general manager and people like that, but the directors of the companies should be all experienced people who know how to run an organization. Now you take most of the state corporations, none of those people know how to run an organization. A good example is Sri Lankan Airlines. I have written about that also. We were state run at a loss. We gave it over to another company to manage. They managed at a profit over a conflict. Just overnight it was taken over. Within 12 months it was worse than what it was. So why? So now a good corporate head has been appointed. He is having 101 difficulties in trying to correct. The man can correct it. Right? But then there has to be a lot of cooperation, there has to be, and then one of the biggest issues in this country is if one person, now I worked in China. Now, China is also trying to solve their employment by employing more people. Right? So the same thing is happening here. Employing more people doesn't solve the employment problem. You need productivity. So there is no measure of productivity in this country. I quoted in my article also. You take the output or the revenue, divide by the number of employees, you will find that they hardly contribute. Now, in say for Japan, when they were developing Japan, say one person had to contribute 11 times his salary for them to recover. In this country, other way around, government is paying them for no recovery.
I think it's time we take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park. We'll return on the other side. Welcome back. We're in conversation with the Executive Council of SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a member of SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we've been talking about the IMF the Wednesday statement of the fourth review conducted by IMF. Yes, the government will not go with the IMF, and we're talking about what we can do going forward. But Mr. Jayaweera, let's turn to talk a little about Sri Lanka's foreign reserves position. Foreign reserves have plunged 70% since 2020, and this has slumped to $2.36 billion by end January. We've been talking about difficulty to manage the purchase of much needed fuel to the country, and also managing other imports. There is an import ban, yes, we're managing it that way, but this government has continually pointed out that these developments, these manifestations are actually wrong measures, imprudent fiscal and monetary policy taken by governments in the past too. I think we spoke about this. But do you think something should have been done without allowing the country go into this situation? Or was it purely due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Easter Sunday effects that led the country to the current foreign exchange crisis?
Well, it makes me laugh because this is a country that lives on excuses. Right? We are whole time giving excuses, but we have no policies. We have no straightforward. There is no red line policy in this country. Now, see, when you do economics, there is a median line. Okay, then if you are heading below the median line, that means danger. Right? You should be always controlling your whatever that is there, whether it is foreign currency, foreign debt, reserves of the country, country growth, all that should be above the median line. When there is a dip, right, the red alert must go, and the economists must get together and start thinking, okay, this is going to happen, right? Let's change the focus. Let's change our strategy. It doesn't happen in this country, right? We are always, as I told you, we go and push the panic button, right? Then we lift the cloth and run. So that doesn't work for a country to develop. So what IMF says, IMF also has a lot of experts. I have taken part in IMF meetings. I have even gone to New York with the government delegation for the World Bank meetings, things like that. Focus. We are not focused. So that's what our administrators, especially the permanent employees or the permanent staffs and the secretaries, have to come up with their strategies. It's not a politicized strategy. What happens in this country is the politicians get involved in doing the strategy. Some of them are educated, yes, must appreciate that they have some sense in their head, but how many of them are there? Less than 10% are educated. The rest are all verbal. Right?
Now, when they say the IMF stresses on the urgency of implementing a credible strategy to restore macroeconomic stability and to reduce the debt, the outstanding debt that we have. But what is this strategy? It looks like we don't understand what our strategy should be. And Sri Lanka does not want to listen to the IMF because Sri Lanka believes a homegrown solution is best suited for our future, our journey forward. So what should this strategy be? Okay,
now our strategy, as the government keeps on saying and the governor of the central bank also keeps on saying, we had a homegrown strategy, and panic button has been pushed now. This panic button should have been pushed maybe 6 months ago. Everything in this country is now imported. Industry has closed. Cottage industry has closed. Small industry is virtually no longer there. Medium industry is trying to survive under the fuel crisis and a shortage of raw material. So they should have looked at it. Now see, a lot of rubbish is being imported into this country. Right? Now this rubbish, we can live without it. We have lived without it. In the 1970s, we lived without all this. So now only, now I heard today that 600 odd items have been banned from import. We can be without those. It's not essential, but industrial imports are essential. Then certain amount of food, right, is essential now, especially for the tourism industry, right? We need good quality material. in the hotels to be used now. 5-star hotels use high quality material. Of course, their prices are high. The low-end hotels use local product. I had a visitor once because I had...
you were in the tourism industry too?
I was in the tourism industry too, but then I had at one time 5 Americans and a British working for me. So when the Brit was going, I invited them home, and I knew he liked steak, so I gave him steak. And then while eating, he said that Tissa, my wife was in the country at that time, he said, Tissa, how is that your beef is soft? There is a way of, making steak with beef. A lot of people don't know it. So we made it, being many times living overseas, coming back and things like that. So I told him, no, this is local beef. So he was surprised, because then he said, beef in this country is hard because your cows go and eat cement bags, they eat garbage, and they are not fed. So that type of story is still being there. So we don't grow, for example, cattle are not grown for beef. Right?
Do you think we have done enough to spur a local manufacturing industry and production to target the export market, given the time of this import ban? Has there been support from the government or other organizations that should support this?
Governments right along has been a failure for industry. Okay, other than industry now, industry is driven by big, strong management, owners, right? We invite some of those owners to make presentations, but I have not heard them telling the government, hey, you guys are doing something wrong. No, I mean, it's a case of wagging the tail. We have to tell now, say, for the American economy. Right now, we are talking of a dollar shortage. Do you know that the dollar does not belong to the US government? Hardly anybody knows. The dollar belongs to 5 families of USA. And the government of USA owes that family, or 5 families, $3 trillion. And by maybe another 4 or 5 years, it will increase to 5 trillion. The government owes them. But dollar is 70% circulated outside the country. Right? No other currency in the world has come to that status. So why is it strong? Because it is the world's trading currency. Now, at one time we were saying that we will deal with yuan. At another time we were saying that we will deal with India. India is also pegged to the US dollar. Right? China is pegged to the US dollar. All the Chinese investments are in USA. Why? Because the dollar is strong, still strong. You can never bring that thing down. And then it's private. Right? Here we depend on the central bank to make the decisions. There the government has no control over the dollar. Right? It's run by 5 families. Things like that. So economy is controlled by the private sector, not by the state sector. So our private sector is driving this economy, even under this crisis. Right? It's the private sector that is driving the economy. Now, see, one of the rich guys of this country has started education, and one of the statements he made is that knowledge of IT is essential for this country to develop. But then, how can our people use IT when we are talking IT in singular? It can't happen. Of course, it happens in China, it happens in Japan, it happens in Germany, because those languages are strong and they have their own systems and management to keep the industry going. Here we can't do in singular. So the strategies have to change. You
say Sri Lanka's economic model needs a drastic change, but given the present circumstances, we see crisis developing in Eastern Europe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the crisis that is developing there, and of course Sri Lanka's current urgency in managing the foreign currency reserves position. Do you think there is room for Sri Lanka to make all these changes?
Definitely. We have to think out of the box. We are still in the box, groping in the dark. We have to look at economic strategy. I mean, wars are there all the time. Now everybody talking of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but then there are other invasions that affected. Now, at one time, the Iranian oil couldn't be shipped, right? But we didn't go into this crisis. Now, because of the publicity and because of the media, we are beating the tom-tom. So what we have to do is keep the economy going. Right now, like my driver saying that why are people spend, he was saying, sir, munga gedara arala miris gahak kitone ka me polymin wala wadiya hondai. Now that's the That's what the common man thinks. So our governments don't think of it, our economists don't think of it, our city planners don't think of it. They are all, and people like you, media, go and film. 1 kilometer long, film. I mean, this is idiotic. All these people can be sent home and told to go to work. Right? Their economy is suffering. They can't make money, they can't make hoppers and sell, or vegetable vendor is all in the queue. Right? And then in this country now, say people always want a vehicle to travel. Don't walk. During our time, we went by bicycle, we went by bus, we walked. You hardly see people walking. Walking people are all below the $2 income a day people that walk, because they can't afford to go by bus. Now see, for example, we use a lot of diesel vehicles. Why are electric vehicles not being used in this country? Now USA has come up with 2035, no more fuel-driven vehicles. It should be electric. Of course, for production of electricity, a certain amount of fuel is required, but that is required to keep the economy and the vehicles moving, not for consumption. So that type of, now see, as I told you, I am involved with the UN, I visit various organizations. I was in a certain neighboring country, they have gone heavy into solar, but their solar is 12 feet above the ground. So I asked them why. They say, no, come, we'll move a little further down. The farmers are growing vegetables under the solar panels. When I went into solar panel industry, 60% of the sunlight passes through the solar panel and hits the ground.
Maximizing the
land utilization. Now we don't think of it. We have, I was in Putlam, we have some lone windmills. You can hear the sound of the windmills. Go to some other countries or drive through California to Palm Springs on the way to Mexico, you can see a million windmills working. Right? That's the energy utilization, wind and solar. Now this is a country that is abundant in solar these days, very hot. I mean, sunlight falls, you can see the shadow for miles, but we are not making it, we are talking about it. Now all the roofs in this country can be converted to solar. All the factories, roofs can be converted to solar. Why are we not doing it? There was a program when I was involved with AmCham, and we had a USAID program where we gave one bulb with a solar panel to countries. It cost 35,000 at that time, and a backup battery. But now, now India, for example, they are producing most of their power requirement during the daytime by solar, and no battery pack. They don't use the solar during the night. So that brings the cost down. Then the lakes. Lakes can be converted into solar industry. There was a project and heavy publicity was given that they are going to use the lakes for solar panels. I don't know what happened to it. I went around the country, didn't see any solar panels in our lakes. So why are we not using? We are, as I said, we are talkers.
I'd like to touch on that, but we just have about 10 minutes on the show, so much to talk to you about. What do we do in order to walk the talk here? You talk about why Sri Lanka, all these politicians, they talk and no one does the walking, but let's identify 5 areas that we can develop, we can focus on to resurrect the economy going forward. Yeah,
one shortest and the easiest is tourism. Right now we have a crisis in the Eastern Europe or Russia
and Ukraine over the highest tourism
that is now.
Arrivals to the country.
That is now. Okay, we had British, we had Japanese, we had Americans, we had other countries coming here. Why are we not going and propagating our tourism in those countries? Now, another laughing matter, okay? Go and read the English in the tourism sites. Atrocious English. Thinking in Sinhala and writing in English. Horrible. So anybody from a English educated country looking at that will think that we are still running with Damudi. The English is so bad. I didn't bother reading the Sinhala, difficult to understand all that grammar, but now these are things that, now we have so many people, experts and people that you go to any museum or any tourism site in this country, very few people speak English. But then there are uneducated young guys. I met a boy, 12, 13. He speaks perfect German. He speaks perfect French. Ingresi Vassar. Why? Because they have the talent, they have the knowledge, they don't have education. That fellow went only to 6th standard because the father is a vendor doing the same thing. So he learned German and French, because that's the tourism industry that we have to cater for. And then most of the people who are coming from Ukraine and Russia are not people who are going to stay at one of the 5 stars in Colombo or 4 stars outside the country. They are in small cottages, paying $15, $8. So that also is required to keep the economy going. Now say Hillary Clinton came to Sri Lanka as a hippie, right? Spending 50 cents a day in this country. That kind of people are also required. We require the high spending tourist also. So that's something that we have to concentrate on. Then exports. We have to manufacture to export. Now, okay, we talk of garments, exports as one of the biggest export industries. But what is the total revenue generated or profit-wise to the country? Less than 30%, because what is required is imported. So we don't have backward integration. I have a friend of mine, he is the largest denim manufacturer in India. Makes everything, right? I told the fellow 15 years ago, why don't you start making jeans? He's manufacturing denim and selling the material. He has started denim, making pants with denims, and he hired an Italian designer, he hired a French advertising firm. The guys are singing. I gave him that idea. So why can't our industry and our people go for backward integration? That's where it is. And then we have to increase the amount of exports from this country. Now, say for Japan, right? 95% of the industry in Japan is small and medium. And now you go to some of the industries in Japan, you find people from Sri Lanka, people from Bangladesh, we are finding people from Portugal. Portuguese are more educated and they don't need a visa to work in Japan. White people, so things like that are being done. Now, at one time, we had a shortage of labor for the construction industry. I know very well, construction industry imported people from Bangladesh to work in this country. Cheaper, they work longer. China is one of the biggest contractors in this country. Why do they bring Chinese prisoners to work in this country? They work here, they work 12 hours, they can't go out. Our people want a tea break. Our people want this, that. I can quote many other examples like this. So we have to think of a different strategy for this country to improve. And the strategy is export, not import. So that's good that 600 odd items are banned from being imported. We can live without it. But industrial imports are a must.
So we were touching on the 5 areas. You spoke of tourism, you spoke of exports, backward integration, and developing exports here. What other areas do you think we can work on? I think state-owned enterprise revival you spoke of at the beginning, so that's our 3rd recommendation. We have 2 more recommendations to the government, suggestions to give.
Okay, now we have a foreign exchange crisis, right? I get a lot of my friends coming from various countries because I tell them now it's the time to come to Sri Lanka. Come and I had 2 visitors or 4 visitors from India. We had a long lunch, and suddenly she told me, "Sir, we need to change money. Banks were closed at that time, 3:30. So I told my driver, where can you change? So they asked me how much can we get for $1, because he was told in India we can get better price for the dollar than changing it at the bank. So I told my driver, take them to a changing place, and then he's calling me and said, "Yours is a wonderful country. I got 145 for $1. So I can extend my stay by another 4 days." And we are talking of our expatriate labor. Labor transfer of money has gone down by 20-30%. Not they are transferring, they are less or transferring less. They are sending by third-party means to their relatives. They are going to the black market and changing. So the government does not get the money. And we are still on a fixed 102 per dollar. Why? Let the dollar float. then the country will develop. So those are things that people or our economists have to think of. They are still, running on that line. They are not going up and down the line, adjusting themselves to meet the economic trend. Why? Everybody knows that we can get, yesterday one of my managers were there and he was trying to organize some dollars, 148 yesterday, right? 102 and we are happy that some of the state banks are advertising we are giving 10 rupees more. Who the hell is bothered about the 10 rupees more when you can get 30 rupees more? So those are things that I call them idiots, right? Our strategic planners are idiotic, right? Governments are run by idiots, right?
And your fifth?
Fifth is, as I said, walk the talk. Right? I have experience in walking the talk. I have taken over dead organizations and made them work. Right? Now say for example, you go to any place in this country, we are supposed to be a smiling nation. Go to a bank, do they smile? No, they don't even look up to the face.
Government officers, they don't smile at all.
I didn't say that. You say that, I'm also a public servant. But there are certain government officers that are very, very cordial. Right? I went to Inland Revenue recently over something, and one of the officers saw me and said, why are you standing there? Come and sit in my office. Because I see that you are important. You come to pay taxes. So this is good. Right? But then when you go to the normal assessor, that is there out to squeeze you and take something. So that attitude change. We need a drastic attitude change in this country for us to develop.
So tourism, support exports, revive state-owned enterprises. You said peopleize state-owned enterprises. You said float the currency and walk the talk. Before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on one thing. You're also a member on the Executive Council of SAARC Chamber of Commerce, among other positions that you hold. We've been talking about trade agreements. We've been talking about linking with other regions, connectivity, but here it seems that SAARC is unexploited still. That's a subject we've been talking about for years. And then there is the GSP plus, the concern there. And at the UNHRC, allegations continue to be leveled at Sri Lanka. So amid all this, how do we strengthen our trade pacts? We went from free trade agreements to economic partnerships we were talking about at one point. So how do we ensure that we have a smooth trade connectivity so that our exports have a better market?
There again, connectivity is important. Moving from country to country, connectivity is important for trade to happen. Okay. Now say SAARC. SAARC doesn't depend on Sri Lanka. SAARC depends on dollar. Right? Even India economy is dependent on dollar. Economy of China is dependent on dollar. Right? Not on the yuan. So that's where we had to look at. We had to look at the dollar. Right? Now at one time, as I said, our idiots were looking at yuan. That's not a, if they look at yen is better because that's a world recognized currency. And China is trying very hard to get the yuan recognized. It won't happen. But then there are certain economists of this country that are writing and saying China will overtake the US economy. It won't happen. Right? Now say US economy run by the private sector of USA, not by the state. Chinese economy is run by the state sector of China. Now only that the Chinese private sector is coming into focus, but the state does not interfere in the management of state organization. Now Indian Oil, that belongs to the government of India. So then there is Reliance. It's a 100% private owned company. Now when Adani comes here, we lift our cloth and run. He is the richest man in India now. We must go and receive him with garlands to bring him here to invest in this country. What do our unions do? Nothing upstairs. So they go on the street protesting about Adani investment, and you guys go and film that also and say, oh, make a honda naya Lanka, make a Lanka vikunano. Now even USA depends on foreign investment, right? Japan depends on foreign investment. Germany, Europe, China. The economy is run on foreign investment, not on the yuan economy. When somebody comes here to invest, what do? We lift our cloth and run, because we are run by empty heads. That emptiness has to be taken out. We need a brain transplant in our politicians as well as the people of this country for the country to develop.
Let's talk about the attitudinal change that should be instilled in Sri Lankan minds, maybe another time. But thank you very much for joining us here tonight on the show. It was indeed a pleasure to have you, or meeting you after several years, but it was lovely talking to you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting.
We had with us Mr. Tissa Jayaweera, an educationist, a business leader, an economist, and also the EXCO member of the International Chamber of Commerce, member of the Executive Council for SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, formerly the president of the American Chamber of Commerce, and other industries also he had a lot of links. So thank you for joining us. We discussed about the Sri Lankan economy in the face of a present crisis situation. Have a pleasant evening. We'll see you again next week with yet another edition.